Okay, welcome to today's meeting. This is going to be a class learning how to use binoculars. And we've done the class in the past, but it's been some years. Did something go wrong? Okay. Excuse me, my name is Phyllis, and I've been observing with binoculars for a very long time. A lot of people, I think, feel like binoculars are not real good for astronomy, but I would beg to differ. I think my clicker just walked away, so I'll click. Let's see. Get my mouse back. Anyway, welcome to everyone. And I did it again. How's that? Blah. All right. So we have a couple of people coming in. Okay, so my very first binocular observing that I remember was when the Apollo landings were happening that summer in 1969. And I decided to lift the family binoculars and sneak outside and look at the sky. So I did that, and being July, and I'm raised in North Carolina, it was just a wonderful thing, and I still think back on how wonderful this setup can be. Family binoculars, which were about this size, and lying in the warm summer grass in the front yard with the binoculars balanced on my face, looking at the moon, hoping to see Apollo 11, which I didn't quite get, but it was fun looking. So if you fast forward a few years, I have used binoculars to observe a lot of different things. Planets, deep sky objects, stars, mostly large deep sky objects, and comets. So I've read also over the years, and I have some examples here. I've been reading different articles, a few online, some in printed magazines, some in books, and I've got those, a few of those here today to share with you. But there are ways to learn about things that you can observe, and I hope to show you a few of those today and give you a few tips on how to improve the observing experience. So I can click. So why are binoculars even a good idea for observing? Well, most people have a pair somewhere around the house. Maybe you use them for birding or spying on the neighbors or what have you, but most people have them. So if you wanted to go out and look at the night sky tonight, you probably have the equipment you need. My favorite part about binoculars is that they're so portable. So this is particularly true of me in the winter. If it's gotten dark, it's after dinner time, and I want to go outside and just take a quick look, I can just grab a pair of binoculars and go out and look at a thing. Or I can have a fancier setup like this, or this one back here. I hope you can see it. Those are really good for a more dedicated viewing session, but we'll get to those in a minute. Does everybody in here have a set of binoculars? Does anybody? Yeah. I see some head shakes. Good. That means that if you wanted to go out tonight and look, you could. It turns out with binoculars, so many people feel like, well, that's not really for observing. That's silly. I'll get a telescope. But it really turns out the binoculars are very, very useful. If you're working your way up to a telescope, please feel like you can get started with binoculars, because there's a lot you can learn. You can learn about the constellations. You can learn about some of the bigger deep sky objects. You can look at planets. And this isn't a good time right now that I am aware of, but they are preferred many times for looking at comets. And I say it's not a good time now because there's not a bright comet right now. This is my comet expert. So a couple of months ago, you probably read about comet ZTF. Man, comets that are big and bright are really good with binoculars if you can get in a dark place. So what kind of are the requirements for all this? Obviously, better optical glass in your binoculars is better. You will get a sharper view. You will get less color dispersion. So if you can get good binoculars, good optical glass binoculars, that's best. If I were beginning, I'd use what I have. And if you determine at some point that they're not really giving you a sharp enough view or has color, you look at a star and you see some funny color business going on. You can get binoculars that have better glass in them that may eliminate some of those problems. One big problem that people have is getting the binoculars focused properly. These binoculars have two focusers, one on each eyepiece. A lot of binoculars will have one focuser. So you will try to get the two sides into focus, and then you can use the one focus control to move all the focus. So your pair of binoculars could be either way. They could have one focuser or two, but you need to make your goal to get a nice crisp focus, regardless of whether there's one focuser or two. Now, this might go back to your question earlier about the way binoculars are rated. And these binoculars have it printed on the back. Every binocular I can think of has a number, X number printed on it. The meaning of all that is, in the case of 8x50, like on the slide, 8 means the magnification of the whole binocular system. 50 means the diameter of a lens. So you got two lenses. You got two 50mm lenses there. So bigger binoculars are going to show dimmer things, but as always, there's a caveat. This is my three bears picture. These are three pairs of binoculars I have at home. And I don't know whether any of these look a lot like maybe what you have, but this is a pretty big pair that I have. We have an example of something very much like that up here, mounted 25x70s. So the 70 part is the aperture of each lens glass in the front. So those are going to be the same size as my big ones. The size in the middle is a very popular size for home use, 7x50. That is Mark's. This is my husband, Mark. Those are his. It has one focus control, as I remember. But my 7x50 pair has two focus controls, but they work very similarly, give similar performance. And then my sort of pocket pair that I take to ball games and things is the 10 power by 25mm. So that's a little bitty glass there. And it has one focuser as far as I can remember. I did not bring those today to share, but we have an example of the 70mm binoculars, and I have these 50s right here. So what about this magnification thing? Well, magnification has to be good, right? We'll get there. Let's compare apples to apples here. Our eyeballs without binoculars at all, we would call that 1 power magnification. That's where we establish the line, 1 times. Okay. The 8 by 50s, similar to this, they would have a magnification of 8 all by themselves. You look through the system, if you will, and you get 8 power. Magnification is going to make the target look bigger, of course. So the view you get in my 10 power by 50 binoculars is going to be a lot lower power than what you're going to see in Anna's 25 power by 70 millimeter binoculars. They'll look different. The last thing is, think about what zooming does to you. For example, when you're taking a picture with your cell phone, if you zoom way in on that bird on that tree out in the front yard, you're going to see the effect of your shaky hands. You're going to see a bigger bird, but it's hard to get a good crisp focus, and you might see some handshake. So zooming is good up to a point. The drawback on the bigger binoculars, obviously they're going to cost more because they have more glass in them. Okay. When you manufacture optical glass, like maybe these, you have to carefully figure the front surface and the back surface of each optical glass element. And there are several in there. There's several more back here at the eyepiece. So the cost of the 70 millimeter glasses is going to be more than the 50 millimeter. Okay. Also, very important, and this goes for telescopes too. People will ask about, well, how powerful is your telescope? Well, how powerful are your binoculars? The real thing here, magnification is usually what is meant by power, or how powerful. But what's really important is how much light these things can gather. So that's the aperture. Okay, and if that doesn't make sense to you, how about this? Let's suppose you're in the desert and you're thirsty. Do you want to catch water from that little rain cloud going over you with a Dixie cup or a big wash tub? You want to collect more water faster with that wash tub. And the aperture of your lenses is the same principle. The more light you can collect into the front aperture and direct through the binocular to your eyeball, the larger aperture is going to bring in more light. Well, that's really good, except for the more glass, the larger the glass, the heavier they become. That can only make sense, right? If you wanted to compare the amount of light coming through the binoculars as compared to coming through your just naked eyeball. Okay, so the eyeball had a 1 power magnification, and the diameter of your dark adapted pupil is about 7 millimeters. It becomes smaller as we age. So mine is obviously 7 millimeters. Actually, I don't think it is, but that's okay. If I compare the 7 millimeter diameter of my eyeball alone to the hole, the aperture of my 8 by 50 binoculars, remember that's 50 millimeters aperture. So the comparison has to be the square of each, because we're talking about a surface area. So here we go. Power square is the number I'm thinking of here. So the radius, 25 millimeters squared of this versus the 3.5 millimeter of my eyeballs. The comparison becomes These little binoculars collect 51 times more light than just my eyeball. Wow. The more light, the better. But this increases with weight is a concern. As I said a minute ago, magnification with your cell phone when you're taking a picture, we got a little bit of a blurry view. Well, part of that is because of the shakiness of our hand. The shaking of the camera, in that case, the shaking of your hands is magnified. So I have a hint for you. Number one, do something that will stabilize your hands as they hold those binoculars. Well, I told you the story about my childhood when I laid on the ground and I balanced the binoculars on the orbits of my eyes. That really helped to stabilize, but it's not always convenient. These are sort of a strap type thing that allows me to adapt the binoculars to a photo tripod. So this isn't my favorite arrangement, but it does work. I got this attachment from Mike Keefe, so used. And the binoculars I had. So the photo tripod I had, this stabilized things an awful lot. So this is just a photo tripod. You may have one at home. If you think about your photo tripod, there's a 1/4-20 bolt under here. And the reason I had to have this plate adapter was because I didn't have a way to screw the 1/4-20 bolt into anything on this particular pair. Lots of binoculars will have a hole right here and it's threaded and you can go in that way. So one might buy an L-shaped bracket so that this threaded hole goes into the top of the tripod and this can be screwed into the front of the binoculars if you have a hole here. So these are commonly available. You can have a look at it when when I finish talking, but this would be called an L bracket for binoculars, whatever. There's another trick that you can use. I was reading an article by a guy in the UK who writes a binocular column, and I will get to it in a minute. He said he got a telescoping handle mop, and he puts his binoculars on top of the sponge end of the mop, and he ties it on there with something. So it looks like we have an example of that in the back. I thought that was a cool hint. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a really good thing. Now, if you really want to be cool, there are also image stabilizing binoculars, and they cost money. And I always thought, well, that's dumb. Until I used a pair. I used a pair one night out by our Jordan Lake site that another member loaned me to look at a comet. And oh my gosh, they were magic. So you might go for image stabilizing binoculars if you can justify the cost. Anyway, those are some tricks to help stabilize the view. One thing I often do is that if I'm going out for a quick look at a comet or something, I will make sure that I can rest my elbows on the car or a mailbox or a fence or something and hold the binoculars in my hands. Now, another hint is don't moose grip your binoculars. The harder you grip on those binoculars, the more likely they are to shake. So when I go out with these, I'll I'll put my elbows on the car or a fence, and I will hold binoculars firmly enough not to drop them, but not firmly enough to shake them. So that's a really good thing to try and do. So these are cheap solutions to a dumb problem. But, we went over the L bracket, and we went over. We didn't really go over the parallelogram mount. This is about the nicest looking parallelogram mount that I've ever seen. But the advantage to having something like this is that it holds your binocular steady for you so you can look at things. But the other thing, being parallelogram design, is if you elevate, can I do that? Yeah. If you elevate, like, you can see how tall I am. He's 6'3". So we have this issue. I will find a thing, for example, and look at it, and he will walk up and just do this to where it's comfortable for him. These are perfect for that. If you have that problem, height problem, this will fix it. And this didn't do right. Okay. Anyway, I bought mine online from somebody that I'm not sure is in business any longer, but I know you can find them on like Orion.com. Where'd you get yours? You got yours locally? Yeah. So sometimes you can get someone to make them for you. Sometimes you can find them commercially available. But those, if you're going to do much binocular observing, those are really, really good to have. And again, how your pair of glasses attaches to it is a very important thing to look for. I believe these, has a threaded hole right on the front that you go into, and that attaches the glasses to a bracket. My parallelogram mount at home works the same way. Screw into the front of my the Father Bear glasses I showed a minute ago. I will screw those in, and then I'm set. So that's the rig that I would normally use when I want to go to the trouble of setting something up. Yes.
So are you saying that when you raise that up and down, whatever you have focused on is still focused whether you go up or down?
For that design. For that design, not for this one. Yeah, so the question was about the parallelogram mount design. Does it really keep the image in view after you change the elevation? The answer is yes. It does not occur for a photographic mount, but it does occur for the parallelogram mount. Very desirable. Pardon me. This is a photo that I took to demonstrate the differences. These are my 16 by 70 binoculars on that tripod with this adapter. So once again, this screwed into the front, which is going to be right here. And that screws into the head of the tripod. So that's how that works. Now, to be very honest with you, I bought those binoculars in 1990 something to look at Comet Hyakutake. No, I don't know. Anyway, it was a long time ago. And I had these on this tripod with this L bracket for about 5 minutes before I decided there had to be another solution. And that's when the parallelogram mount happened. So keep in mind that if you have that really big set of glasses on a mount like this, you might have to do this. And in order to move glasses, you have to fiddle with handles, and it gets to be a little bit hard. With the parallelogram mount, you just push it around. There's no tightening of handles. So again, about 5 minutes, maybe less. There they are again, a different view. And you can see very well on this shot that there is a threaded hand knob there that goes into the front of the binoculars. And here's the threaded knob that goes in from the bottom of the tripod head. So that's how that thing attaches. Now this is the other mount I have, the parallelogram mount. If you think about it, it looks a lot like the model that Anna brought. Hers is a lot more attractive than mine, but they're very similar. Mark had made this tripod for some telescope somewhere. And I bought the parallelogram mount to screw into the top of the tripod that used a 1/4-20 bolt. So once I got those mounted, I had to have the counterweights on there. Anna's are much more attractive than mine. But the situation is the same, where you have a parallelogram right here and you have some counterweight, and all this stuff up here can move. So if I'm looking at something and I want to look at a nebula very nearby, it's really easy to move this rig because this axle moves, and obviously it moves up and down, and it pivots around that axle. So I've got a lot of degrees of movement there. And it is very easy. Unlike this, you have to loosen knobs and things. And then weight happens and things go clunk. But they work if that's what you have. Here is my 16x70 glasses on the parallelogram mount, and you can see there's a threaded knob there to hold into the front of the binoculars. And all of this stuff here moves. This moves, this moves. I mean, there are a lot of degrees of motion with this mount. I like it a lot. So what do you think you can see? What do you think you're going to see if you go out tonight? Who's been out recently with binoculars? Wow, great. Did you have the binoculars out in a place where there were neighborhood lights and things? Yeah, they're so convenient. I mean, what are you going to do? Well, they do work better in a darker place. So you might consider your vacation this summer if you're taking one. I have been to the beach many times and just taken binoculars and walked out toward the water where it's really dark and look at something. If you go camping someplace in the summer, binoculars were my weapon of choice due to packing room. One person's telescope got to go, but mine didn't. Anyway, keep these things in mind. If you're going someplace where you can get away from some lights, binoculars are a real good thing to have. You don't necessarily have to have an expensive telescope. I think what I find oftentimes is that people may start with binoculars and move up to telescopes, but I also find people who jump into imaging, they'll get this imaging equipment set up, and then, you got to wait for that exposure to happen. Maybe you're taking a whole lot of exposures for some hours or something. And I've learned that a lot of people who do that kind of observing like to have binoculars with them. So they're not completely disassociated with the sky. They can set up their imaging rig and then go look at the night sky with binoculars. It's a pretty good solution. You might try it. We've talked about the darkness of your observing location. I will say this, in my front yard, if my neighbors across the street have their garage lights on, not good. Make friends with your neighbors. Call them up, text them, do something. Another thing, my next door neighbor had lights in the upstairs of their house, which shone down right where I wanted to look. So make friends with your neighbors. Anyway, if you can, obviously you might not be able to. Under the category of what to look at, don't look at the sun with your binoculars. I know they're just dumb binoculars, but remember that 50 times thing for each of your two eyeballs? If you look at the sun, even with binoculars, there have been experiments that showed if you put a piece of paper where your eye would be behind binoculars, the piece of paper caught fire. So just don't do that. You will lose your sight, and you will probably lose your sight permanently. And it takes that long. So please don't do that. However, a good target is the moon. Back in 1969, I'm lying in the grass and I'm looking at the moon, and I'm shocked at what I can see. It was like being in an airplane flying over the moon. Now, I didn't get to see the Apollo astronauts, but my goodness, the shadows of the mountains and the rough surface around the craters, all these things, really cool to see. You can learn a lot about the moon with a pair of binoculars. Always be sure, according to the phase of the moon, look at the line between brightness, sunlight, and darkness on the moon, because that line called the terminator is going to have a lot of texture to it that you can see with binoculars. And it's really cool. It really is. Didn't see those astronauts, but I saw that terminator. It was great. Again, remember the hints for stabilizing your view. That is super important. If you are looking at the moon, for example, and you're concentrating on some mountains, you need to A, focus, and B, hold it as steady as you can so that you can really study what you're seeing. It will be really good. Now, if you are looking at the moon, it'll be bright. When we have little kids at observing sessions and we're looking at the moon, it's very easy for me to see whether the kid is looking through the eyepiece correctly, because I can see the brightness of the moon on the child's face. And if it's up here, they're not seeing it. But if it's right here, they're seeing it. So it is bright, but it's not like the sun. It's not going to blind you. So I think if you look at the moon when it isn't full, then it's not so bright that it hurts, and you're able to see more of that texture on the moon. Give it a try. Right now is not a great time for planets. However, if you are able to look at planets with your binoculars, Mars is a great target. You can train yourself to look for the color. You ever think of Mars as a colored target? It is. It looks a pale orange, not white like a lot of stars, but pale orange. Jupiter is not really available right now, neither is Saturn. But when they come back around from behind the sun, you'll notice they're a creamy yellow. And if you pay a lot of attention, they're not the same color yellow. They're a little different. In my bigger binoculars, if I look at Jupiter, I can see the bands faintly, and I can see the 4 moons of Jupiter. You believe that? You can see the moons of another planet with your binoculars? You can do it. You can tell they're moons and not stars generally, because you probably see 4. You may only see 2 or 3, but the other thing is they're in alignment. You'll see nice Jupiter and some dots in a nice alignment. That's because that's the way it really is. Now, if you look in your image and you see little Jupiter and some dots, but you see some dots that aren't in alignment, those are stars. The planets are not way up there. The moons of that planet are not way up there. They're in a line. One thing you can see right now in the evening sky, if you go out and look, is Venus. Venus is bright, but if you look at it carefully, it is bright, but there's a phase. I think it's a crescent phase right now. Yeah. So if you look at it carefully, you'll notice it's not round. It will be some phase, and it does vary. But you can see that even with your binoculars. Now, Venus is pretty bright in the western sky, and you shouldn't have trouble finding it. So hopefully, if you find a bright something in the sky in the evening, try to see whether it's got a face. If it is, I think you're looking at Venus. It's up late, yeah. Some planets you just can't see very well with binoculars. The planet Mercury you can see in binoculars, but good grief, be so careful because Mercury is near the sun. And if you get the sun at the same time you get Mercury, you will have terrible trouble. But it can be seen. Mercury is kind of an orangish color, a reddish orange color. Uranus is, I think it would take really big binoculars to see much there, but it is a bluish disk, small. But it's always obvious to me in like an 8-inch telescope because of its color. With binoculars, this is going to be hard. The planets Neptune and Pluto are real. Well, I said Pluto. Are we okay with that, gang? Pluto is a planet at my house. I'm sorry. However, if you were to look at Neptune, it would be too dim. I don't think you would see it in binoculars. The same for Pluto, if it's a planet or not. Again, I think the greatest evening elongation for Mercury was this summer, but I think we're past the greatest angle. So I think you could see it now, but it would be hard. And the further into May we get, the closer to the sun Mercury gets, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to even try. So I will tell you a little trick. I haven't gotten to the printed matter yet, but a lot of monthly magazines will have a binocular article, but they'll also have some information about the planets. I think that this is May. Yeah, this is May. If you look in here, you'll see the information about planets, how bright they are, which ones are in the evening, which ones are in the morning. This is where I get my planet information oftentimes. And you'll see that if you looked for this month, I think Mars and Venus, and it's not a great time now, but things change constantly. And as regards to the phase of Venus, that'll be in a magazine like this. So if you think you see something and you think Venus looks like a crescent, you can look at a place like this and verify that you really did see it, or, oh boy, you didn't. Okay, so my favorite thing to look at, I think, with binoculars is comets. And we've been on a comet mission more than once. He's usually imaging the comet, and I'm usually looking at the comet. But because a comet has this nice bright nucleus, hopefully, and some tail, a lot of tail, short tail, whatever, the size of the image in the sky is fairly big. It's usually too much for an eyepiece on a telescope. So binoculars are perfect for that. Now, sometimes it's too dim. The comet is too dim. And you want to go to a really dark place in order to be able to see that vague tail. So a lot of times comets, you'll see the head of the comet and it's just another bright fuzzy. But you need to train yourself to look for that tail because the shapes vary and the intensity of them vary. So it's a thing worth paying attention to. And if you miss a bright comet, then you haven't been watching the news. The news loves to talk about bright comets. So it's easy to figure out when there's going to be something really worthwhile to see. If you are married to the comet guy, then you just kind of know what's out there. And then hey, we're going observing tomorrow night to see that, okay, I have a built-in alarm clock. You probably don't. But the news people, they will do it for you. Now, we have had to go away from the house, the front yard, because there are too many neighbor lights on. Maybe we go to Crabtree Lake is near our house. And so we can go to that park and it's open all the time. I can go to a paved walkway and he can set up for imaging. I can look and it's away from lights. You may have another park that will work for you. Moonless for comets is good. No house lights from neighbors is good. If you want to look at deep sky objects, now this might be getting a little beyond the capability of a magazine to tell you where things are. So reading articles online or maybe in a magazine can help, but this is when you begin to need a book that will help you learn what things are appealing in binoculars. Generally, when we would go camping, he would take imaging equipment, I would take the binoculars. And folks, laying in a lounge chair to do your observing is really good. So maybe I'm laying in a lounge chair and I have some fairly small binoculars and I have these charts. And I can look for an object that's shown in one of these charts. And it may be too dim for me to see, but it may not be. But you can use charts to help you find things to look at. You can read a book. I want to say, 99 celestial sights. So there's 99 ideas. I have another book that I've had a long time and used called Touring the Universe in Binoculars. This has lots more than 99 suggestions, and there's a couple more books that we'll show in a moment. At any rate, what kind of deep sky objects would we see in our binoculars? Open clusters are really cool in binoculars because they're usually sort of bigger, and it's a sprinklings of stars on a black background. Some of them really are definitely bright enough for binoculars. They're a very popular class of object to look for in your binoculars. This time of year, we have some really bright, nice globular clusters, which is a little knot of stars, really packed in together. And there are several listed here. It's a great time of year to be looking for these. All summer long is a good time for globular clusters. Another thing I really enjoy looking at, if I'm away from bright lights, are nebulae. So I've given two examples here. I've seen these from places that are dark enough I can see them naked eye. And so if you look at those with binoculars, you can get some really attractive views. You can begin to see the structure in the nebula. You can see the dark parts, the brighter parts, and so on. So this also is a good category of things to look at. So often people want to look at galaxies. They're often too small. there are a couple of exceptions. M31 and M33. Where did I put it? There it is. These guys are going to be more in the fall sky. They're bright enough to see in binoculars in my backyard. Well, M33, M31, yes. Those are galaxies millions of light years away, and you can see them. There's an observing technique that I can share with you. There really are two. If you are trying to see something dim, like a galaxy or a nebula or something, there's two tricks you can try. One of them is called averted vision. And that has to do with the physiology of the eye. But if you look directly at the thing, you may not see it. But if you look just a bit to the edge of it, you could get a more sensitive part of your eyeball and see it. So that's one trick, averted vision. Sort of a corollary to that maybe is if you can fix your binoculars on a mount and you're looking at where you think there should be a thing, you can just vibrate the picture a little, deliberately shake the picture a little, and you'll see something in there move, and that might be a very dim object. So that's another trick. The last trick I can share requires the purchase of some extra equipment. Years ago, I was down in Florida observing with people, and a friend said, "Hey, look at this planetary nebula." And they handed me some binoculars just about like this. Well, there's no way you were going to see this nebula. And I thought, you're crazy. So I looked, and daggone, it was in there. I could see it. I think it was Jones. It was J900. That's what it was. Very dim. And I thought, well, what's going on? So I asked him, and he had threaded 2 eyepiece filters, UHC eyepiece filters, one into each eyepiece. So I usually associate these types of filters with a telescope and an eyepiece view. But he had done the same thing to his binoculars. And this particular object we were looking at was big enough to be seen in binoculars and very dim, so they needed the contrast enhancement of the filters. This means you got to buy 2 of those filters to get the results. But oh my gosh, it was really cool. It was really, really cool. So that was tip number 3. Now, I find that these are classes of objects that I don't look at so much. Just, I think it's my personal desire to look at variables and doubles. But I know that the Europeans, man, they love these things. They'll watch variable stars that vary in brightness with binoculars. And the key to the game there is to be able to compare the brightness of some star to a star that's not a variable and try to guess the magnitude of that star. And you can watch a star go through its light variation, however long it is. And the Europeans love this stuff. Another thing is double stars. The thing I enjoy with double stars is looking at a double star pair that has contrasting color. So once again, we can see color in stars. A lot of people don't know that, but you can. And you can definitely pick this up in binoculars. Alberio, which is what, Beta Cygnus? Yeah. That pair, I think, is blue and yellow. And you can see this. No problem. They're fairly bright. You can find them in your own front yard and look at them in binoculars, and you can judge the distance between them. You can judge the colors, and it's really cool. And again, I think the Europeans are ahead of us on that. Double stars are a thing you can see in a little more light pollution, and maybe that's why they go there. Now, what else could you see? Well, there are thousands of things, thousands of stars out there that are bright enough to be seen in binoculars. How do you find these thousands of things? Well, we have this magazine, and I'll leave this out for you guys to look at. This happens to be the May issue of Sky and Telescope. We have another magazine in the United States that also has a good binocular column. It's called Astronomy. So these come out on a monthly basis, and I will try to find the page where the binocular highlights article is. There it is. So in Sky and Telescope, which you can find at your local Barnes and Noble or whatever your newsstand is, it has a binocular highlight article. He discusses one thing, which is not completely satisfying to me, but that's what he has. If you come up with an astronomy magazine, they'll have that at your newsstand too. That article is written by Phil Harrington, and he usually gives more objects to look at than the one in this magazine. But Phil also wrote a book years ago, and there's a whole collection of things to look at and tables of information you can look at to see, wow, this is a double star and this is how it looks, or this is a nebula and this is how it looks. So, and a good bit of description. So this is a really good book to have. Or his monthly article in astronomy. Another thing you can have is a monthly magazine that comes out of the UK. And I've had trouble finding it lately, but I think it's because my Barnes and Noble is closing. But you may look for yourself near your nearest newsstand for Sky at Night magazine. It's published in the UK, costs a lot to ship a magazine from the UK, but there's an article in there called Binocular Tour, written by a fellow named Stephen Tonkin. And he'll give you a half a dozen targets to look for. He'll tell you how big you need binoculars. He'll show you a map of how to find these things. It's a terrific article. Now, as far as books go, we saw Stephen Harrington's book, Phil Harrington's book. And here's another one that you might find. This is from one of the people that used to write for Sky and Telescope. His name is Gary Saronic. So there are 99 targets in here. You can come and look if you like. And he'll give you a picture like this of what you might see in your binoculars, what you're looking for. So here's another book. If you want to go the harder way, always for me to go the hard way, this is the Pocket Sky Atlas set of charts for the whole sky. And I really enjoy looking at this. I usually have my red flashlight and I'm in my lounge chair and I have my binoculars. Sometimes the eyelids get in the way. But you can find an awful lot of stuff to look at in this. And this is available at your newsstand. You can find this book online. You can find this book everywhere. Very popular. Excuse me? The book is called Pocket Sky Atlas.
There's a larger version.
Yes, there is.
Jumbo out.
For those of us whose eyes need help. Okay, so we got all those. We've talked about these books. I will mention one more book that I don't have a copy to show you. And it is written by this gentleman from the UK who writes a monthly article online that's free to access, by the way. I'll have a URL for his site in a few slides. Stephen Tonkin wrote a book, and it's bound very much like this one, where it's comb bound and you can lay it open with a bunch of targets. Now, writing from the UK, he's a Northern Hemisphere person. So it really does apply to us too. Now, if he were in the Southern Hemisphere, maybe not, but his writings really work well even for us. We talked about the monthly magazines. The online article that I enjoy the most, pardon me, is the one written by this fellow in the UK. And he just does a really good job of describing what you're going to see, how much glass, if you will, how much you're going to need to be able to see some things. And he shows you a map with the different things, and they're all in pretty close proximity in the sky. So one map will do it. If you want to, you can scan this QR code and it'll go to his website called Binocular Sky. And his monthly article is free. I look at it every month. So that is a very good resource, by the way. Suppose you want to get a little further into observing with binoculars. The club has a membership in the Astronomical League. So that means we have access to Astronomical League information like the Messier binocular program. You have to observe, I've forgotten how many, some number of Messier objects with your binoculars. 50? It is very doable, very, very doable. They have a deep sky binocular program. Once you get past the Messiers, maybe you want to look at some more stuff. Did you ever do that one? Yeah, we have somebody that did that one. There's also ones for double stars. And I'm not so sure I've got that slide on here. Yeah, I don't. If you want to get into double star observing with your binoculars, go on astroleague.org and look for that observing program because they've got it. Now, this was a shocker for me. Sometimes you have inherited some terrible, horrible old pair of binoculars. And I inherited these. And boy, they were rough and they would hardly move. But being lights, I thought maybe they would be good. So I let a friend who's into birding look, and he wanted to buy them off me right away. So I decided to have them refurbished, repaired. So I found this place in Oklahoma called Sutterth Optical Repair. The guy is an ex-Navy guy who did optics for the Navy for his career, and now he's got his own optical repair business. So his name is Corey Sutterth. Oh my gosh. Can you believe that's the pair before and that's the pair after? That very pair is right here. These came to me through inheritance from a U.S. Army soldier in occupation Germany, World War II. The lights people who are now Leica, they kept handwritten records of everything. So I have seen the handwritten bill of sale from September of 1945 for these binoculars. And these are sharp. These are great binoculars. And I got them completely restored by mailing them to Oklahoma. You really can revive something if you have to. I want to thank everybody for coming. I have a few more links to share on the very next slide. I think we have enough to go out and look at some planets tonight, or some deep sky objects. I can't think of any comments. Anyway, I hope that you will be confident enough to go out, try to stabilize yourself as best you can, point those binoculars up and enjoy the night sky. It is just so convenient. Are there any questions? Is it working well?
Muted right now.
Yeah, okay. Does anybody want to ask a question? This is so that you can be heard on Zoom. The Zoom recording. Yes. Thank you.
So exactly how are you putting the filters on your, I'm thinking now most of my binoculars are optimized for birding, like, because I'm going birding right up
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine like pulling off an eyepiece, screwing it in.
No. You don't pull the
So-
eyepiece off.
But
It,
there's no place to screw them in on the front either,
the filter would go back here on the back,
right?
and this is threaded.
Oh,
If yours aren't,
No.
we're hosed.
right, yeah.
But yeah,
But it's-
the back is where I would thread.
So can I get
Mhm.
you to write a note to my wife that I need another?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, boy, that sounds like hot water.
Okay, so I wanted to make sure that,
Right.
yeah, that's,
You know, for telescope eyepieces,
yeah, you put them in.
I've been known to do this.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But of course you can screw into the back of an eyepiece.
Right.
You can screw in on these eyepieces
Okay.
so that the filter is in front,
Right.
well, between your face and the eyepiece lens.
Otherwise
If you're
it's-
not threaded eye, yeah, you got to get that flat. Any others? Any other questions? Okay.
Phyllis, this is Wayne Redinger. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I was wondering, are there any solar filters suitable for binocular use?
Yeah, they would go between the sun and the front of your binoculars. Probably a friction fit. You have them.
These are solar,
Cool.
75 bucks.
But do you mount those? Okay, good. How much magnification? 10? It works. It works. That's great. Any other?
So question in chat is there a loaner program for binoculars?
I am not aware of any binoculars
There should
in
be.
the loaner program.
Yeah, it's all telescopes right now, but that is definitely some feedback we can take to that committee.
Okay. Anything else? Let's see.
Yeah, no one else on Zoom.
I couldn't do that again if I tried. Okay. Anything else?
Phyllis,
right.
one more question, Phyllis.
Okay.
I'll wear eyeglasses. Is there any techniques for using your eyeglasses with a binocular that's comfortable?
Yes, you have two choices depending on your optical problems in your eye. You can leave your glasses on and observe from your eyeball through your glasses into the eyepieces of the binoculars. I have astigmatism, so I do that. The other option is to take off your glasses, focus your binoculars for your vision without the glasses, and just observe that way. The problem there, of course, is you can't see your chart. You got to put the glasses back on to see the chart, but that's what has to happen. Either way. Anyone else? Anything else? Does everybody know how to do QR codes with their camera on their phone? Okay. So if you wanted to go to Astronomy Magazine, you could learn about it there. They have that monthly article. If you wanted to go to Sky and Telescope, who also has a monthly article, you could go there. And if you want to go to the Sky at Night magazine, it has the monthly article, the really good one. You can go to here. Now, I'm not sure how easy it is to find a printed copy of that magazine these days. The shipping from the UK has gotten awful. So it may not be available, but if you can get your hands on a copy of that magazine, it is worthwhile. Anybody else? Anything else? No.